Get paid to play free games with SuperDraft Pro. Subscribe to a SuperDraft Pro Super Pass where you can unlock exclusive fantasy games and sports betting experiences on SuperDraft, the official fantasy partner of Caesars Rewards. Scan the QR code on your mobile phone to get started.
All right, we are in a couple of few weeks before the actual USFL season going to be starting. And by the way, I am happy because I am in Michigan, so I am a fan of the Michigan Panthers anyway. But anyway, join me right now. By the way, he is a football writer, so you can find him on Fanside, the Jet Press, CFL News Hub, which he's covering the Toronto Argos and also covering the XFL and the USFL for XFL News Hub and the USFL News Hub. So check out that site. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my good friend, Mr. Mike Mitchell. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Sean, for having me on.
Exactly. So it is like I was saying earlier that this is the first time I'm actually interviewing for someone of the USFL because usually you do interviews with NFL and college football.
Right. Well, yeah, thank you. I'm a longtime USFL guy, not to date myself, but, I followed the original USFL when I was a kid. And now it's very unique and interesting that it's back, although there's some controversy right now about the name and how that's all going to work out. We can maybe get into that. But yeah, it's fascinating times in the football world right now with all the crazy news kicking off in Birmingham. It's going to be interesting times.
Now, I wanted to talk about that because I heard in a couple of weeks that the original USFL is suing the new USFL, which is owned by Fox. So, what are the details of that lawsuit for those that are not aware of that?
Well, for quite some time now, the USFL's original ownership group and management group, they've been kind of, for lack of a better term, holding a candle for the old league, and they've been managing its properties through memorabilia and merchandise and things, but as time has passed, their trademarks have expired. So while they did have a bank account set up and a few different things set up, Steve Earhart and that group, Fox and the Spring League with Brian Woods, they swooped in and legally acquired the trademarks for the United States Football League and their team names. Steve Earhart and that group has been trying to reach out and connect with the new USFL and trying to work with them and see what they can work out together. But unfortunately, those heads haven't met, and it's reached the point now where Steve Earhart and the old USFL group, I know this can get a little confusing, they're suing the USFL, trying to prevent them from using the name. Now, hopefully cooler heads prevail here. I feel like if both sides would have just gotten to the table and worked something out, you want to pay some respect to the alumni who put in the hard work, and you want to make them part of this because, quite frankly, Fox could have named their football league anything. They could have called it the World Football League. They could have called it anything else. So Sean, can we pause for a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just I'm sorry.
Yeah. Now it's recording in progress.
Okay. So as I was saying, this old USFL, new USFL feud that's currently going on in the courts, you hope that these two sides can come together and settle whatever their differences are. I mean, we're a month away from the season starting, so we'll see if there are any injunctions, whether or not the name will have to be changed, whether or not the new USFL Fox could move forward. I mean, as I was saying, Fox could have picked a different name to name their league after. And, they decided to go with the USFL for a reason, because there's equity in that name and there's name value, even though for a lot of the current generation, they weren't around when the USFL existed, but it does have a name. So that there's a reason why they picked those old names and why they picked that old league name. So hopefully the whole situation gets cleared up in the near future. I think everyone's excited about the possibility of a new football league springing up and the opportunities it's going to provide for players and coaches.
That's absolutely. I'm looking forward for the USFL 2022 in April. And by the way, I'm very excited for week one because with week one, not only is it going to be televised by Fox, but it's also going to be televised by NBC. So the first time that's ever happened since Super Bowl one.
That's amazing. It's a smart business move. the ratings from the Fox telecast and the NBC telecast, as well as Peacock, and they can combine that audience, and it'll be a way for them to, I guess, artificially inflate the overall viewership total. So it's smart. If we're getting close though. They need to start promoting and marketing the league, ramping it up a little bit on Fox's TV partners, NBC, and all that. But I think, as is the case with most of these leagues, that first week, that first game, it's going to get a lot of mainstream football fans to just sample it and check it out. So it's vital, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So hopefully the football that they present on the field is of a good quality where you can keep fans still interested as the weeks progress.
Exactly. Now, I want to talk about the USFL draft that happened a couple of weeks ago because we were trying to schedule a couple of weeks, but unfortunately we couldn't terms with it until now. So that's the great part. However, my Michigan Panthers were the number one team with the draft pick, and they picked Shea Patterson, not my school, but my favorite team is Michigan. If those guys don't know about Shea Patterson, he was a 5-star recruit who started at both Mississippi and Michigan because he had 8,800 yards and he threw 68 touchdowns against just 27 interceptions. And he was the first QB off the board in the USFL's first round, by the way. So I'm looking forward for that. And he did play for the Kansas City Chiefs, but not like a snap, nothing like that. And he did play in the CFL. For those people who have not aware about that, I was like, wow, he did play for the CFL.
Yeah, he was a backup this past season with Montreal, actually, when they made the playoffs. And he was also in the spring league last year, but he was only a backup. It's interesting to see big play Shea get another opportunity, this time to, potentially start. You would assume, even though his backup has got some name value in Paxton Lynch, you would assume that Shea Patterson's going to get an opportunity to, finally get a chance to get on the field and display what he can do, because in the NFL, it's very difficult as a quarterback, if you're a third or fourth string guy, to ever get an opportunity unless a bunch of injuries happen in front of you. So Shea Patterson, obviously in that area in Michigan, he's a well-known name. And he had a good college career, but things haven't worked out for him yet as a pro. But the USFL has arrived now, so he's going to get another chance.
And the one thing I noted about Shea Patterson when he was at Michigan, he's not afraid to scramble. So if he sees an opportunity, he's going to do that. If you look at his highlights when he was at Michigan. So it shouldn't be a surprise by there. And then you also got head coach Jeff Fisher as well. So that's probably a great reason why, if you look at the odds, that Michigan Panthers are favored to win this inaugural championship.
And they are. And, having Jeff Fisher is a big help to them. And that's Michigan's going to have a lot of eyeballs on them. They've got a very good following on social media right now as we speak.
Oh, yeah.
And having Fisher, he's got a history with mobile quarterbacks. Obviously, he had Vince Young way back when with Tennessee. So if Shea can bring that element of his game to play and utilize it, the thing you worry about with these quarterbacks with in every situation in the league is the limited amount of time that these teams have to get together and to gel. So training camps are going to be starting in a week, and you got less than a month to get ready for the regular season. So what you have in the USFL essentially is 8 brand new teams. It's like 8 expansion teams,
right?
And these coaching staffs and players all getting together, cramming together, and trying to get ready for week 1 as best as they can. So we'll see how it goes. It's going to be interesting the early part of the season, how much of a leash some of these quarterbacks are going to get. You got a lot of talented guys in the league, the Clayton Thorsons, Jordan Teamu, Kyle Sloter with New Orleans, of course, Shea Patterson, Paxton Lynch. You wonder if they're going to get an opportunity to iron out the kinks in the early going, because it's almost going to be like preseason that first week, because they're not playing any preseason games. They're not playing any games. There might be some scrimmages here and there before the season starts, but that's going to be fascinating. There's going to be a little bit of pressure on some guys like Shea Patterson to come out the gate playing well, and you wonder whether or not Jeff Fisher is going to have patience. I saw some of his comments today. He was interviewed by R.J. Young, and Fisher was talking about steamrolling the entire league. It was pretty cocky. So he has a lot of faith in the team he put together. So, and rightfully so. Michigan has a very good team on paper, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch, how these quarterbacks play and how the leadership role they're going to have to take, because they're going to have to unify an entire offense and get on the same page with their offensive coordinator and get that all working in unison as the season begins.
Now, you did name the person Jordan Tavey because he did play in the XFL for the St. Louis Black Battlehawks. But those people have
Right.
not aware about that because I did remember watching the XFL because there was one point that he was like a potential quarterback. I forgot what it was, but he was one of those potential NFL quarterbacks that was in the draft. And unfortunately, it didn't work out well.
Yeah, he was undrafted. Jordan Ta'amu, make a long story short, he went to Ole Miss. Ironically enough, his arrival at Ole Miss led to Shea Patterson transferring. And Jordan Ta'amu had some good talent that he threw the football to. He had DK Metcalf and AJ Brown and Dawson Knox. And so he had a good college career, but he went undrafted. He went to the Houston Texans. He was Deshaun Watson's backup, and he didn't make their roster. The XFL drafted him. He went to St. Louis, played for the Battlehawks. He led the XFL in completion percentage. He's a very good runner. And so very young player, tall, good arm. And he got an opportunity in the NFL. He was signed by the Kansas City Chiefs, made their practice squad. The Chiefs used Jordan Ta'amu in practice to simulate playing against Lamar Jackson. And so the Chiefs, when they beat the Ravens, Diana Rossini and other reporters were talking about how the Chiefs felt that Jordan Ta'amu was a big help during the week preparing for Lamar because they had to prepare for a mobile quarterback. Obviously, Lamar's on a different level than everybody else.
Right.
But it's good to be able to practice against somebody who's mobile as you're getting ready for the game. So Jordan Ta'amu is an interesting talent. I mean, since 2020, since the XFL, because of COVID, had to suspend league play.
Right.
He's been on 3 different NFL teams, but he's been on their practice squads. And he was with Washington, he's with Detroit, he's with Kansas City. And like I mentioned earlier, when you're a 3rd or 4th string quarterback, it is you hardly, if ever, get any reps.
Right.
And you don't get an opportunity if you're a 24-year-old guy to go out there and get reps and get better, because that's what quarterbacks need. They need time and they need reps and need game action. You're not going to get any better just in practice or on the sidelines holding a clipboard. So for guys like Jordan Ta'amu, this is a chance for them to show the National Football League that, hey, I have the ability to play on a high level. And a lot of XFL fans are going to be watching the Tampa Bay Bandits and Todd Haley because St. Louis was the most popular team in the XFL, the highest rated team TV ratings wise. Yeah, they were going to have, before, unfortunately, the league shut down, they were going to have over 50,000 fans at their next home game. So they were a hot ticket in St. Louis. The Battlehawks are still loved to this day. And Jordan was a part of that. And they were a winning team in first place and all that in playoff hunt before that season ended. So I think he's going to be fascinating. He's with Todd Haley, which is an NFL guy who's worked with Ben Roethlisberger and other guys. So that helps. He's going to be playing a pro style offense. But Jordan Ta'amu has the ability to play because he's mobile, to do RPO style offense and to be a good runner too. So hopefully Haley capitalizes on his skill set. He's a talented young guy. I think people are going to be, people who haven't seen him before are going to be pretty surprised how good he is.
Now, speaking of those 2 quarterbacks, now you are a New Jersey Generals fan, by the way.
I am.
So
I am.
What can you tell my listeners what's so great about the New Jersey Generals, in your opinion?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a longtime New Jersey Generals fan, and I'm covering the Generals now for USFLnewshub.com. And Mike Riley is their head coach, for people who haven't been paying attention to all the ins and outs of the USFL. And he's got a long time history. He's coached in college. Obviously, he's coached in the NFL, has been a head coach, but he's got a long time history of being in these types of leagues. He won Grey Cups in the CFL. He's coached in the AAF, the Alliance of American Football. He coached in the XFL as well as an offensive coordinator. So he's had a lot of success. He's got a winning record in college and all those other leagues I just mentioned. He also coached in the World League of American Football for the NFL way back when with San Antonio, a long time ago. So he's got a winning record there too. So he's got a lot of experience working in these types of leagues. The big question mark with the New Jersey Generals as we go into the season here is the quarterback position. We mentioned all these names prior: Jordan Ta'amu and Shea Patterson and Paxton Lynch, guys that people know. Unfortunately, they have 2 players on the Generals roster who are currently slotted as their quarterbacks who are unknown, and that's Ben Holmes and DeAndre Johnson. Now, some people might know the name DeAndre Johnson. He was on Last Chance U. He was a star on that reality show. And so he has a lot of talent, 4.3 speed, tall quarterback, but extremely raw. At one point, he was Jameis Winston's backup at Florida State, but he had some issues. and he was let go by there. So he's a well-traveled guy in college, and he's just getting an opportunity to see if he can get his feet wet in the pros. Ben Holmes is a fascinating guy. Used to be a wide receiver, transferred, transitioned to playing quarterback.
Okay.
And so he broke a lot of records, but at a smaller level. So this is fascinating that Mike Riley, a guy who recruited Tom Brady at USC, unfortunately, USC pulled the scholarship and Brady ended up going to Michigan. But Riley's got a history with quarterbacks, and he's betting on two guys who are very raw, very inexperienced, and that a lot of people don't know who they are. So he's taking a gamble. He could have very well, during the draft process, drafted some young veteran who has experience, but he didn't do that. So we'll see if it works out for the Generals. The rest of the roster, they have some very good players all across the roster, up and down. They had a very good draft, supplemental wise, and the regular draft, the positional draft. So I think quarterback, like always in football, is make or break. And so if those young men, Ben Holmes and DeAndre Johnson, don't live up to the billing, then it could be a long season for the Generals. We'll see if Riley was right in putting his faith in those two.
Now, outside of offensive players, which defensive player do we need to pay attention to?
Oh, that's a very good question. You know, the Houston Gamblers, there's a couple players there. There are two players. The Houston Gamblers defensive coordinator is Tim Lewis. He used to coach with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He coached the Birmingham Iron, the AAF. He took a lot of his former players from the Alliance. Two players I really like are Jamar Summers, who was a cornerback in the XFL with the New York Guardians. He's been on a lot of NFL rosters, but he, for whatever reason, hasn't gotten an opportunity to move up the depth chart. He was also with the Birmingham Iron. He was very good there. And so Jamar Summers, linebacker Beniquez Brown are two guys to look out for the Houston Gamblers, because Tim Lewis is the defensive coordinator there. And I think those are two guys to watch out for. The New Jersey Generals, Devontae Bosby, he was in the AAF. He was in the NFL recently with New England and Denver. He's a very talented defensive back. I think he could be one of the better players there. There are a few other players around the league that are fascinating, but those are some that just stick out to me as players. Bosby is a guy who's just in the NFL, so it would not shock me is if as soon as the USFL season ends, if he's not on the workout circuit or if he gets on an NFL team, either practice squad or roster, because he's a good player and he's got good size, good cover guy, and I think he'll play well in the league. And he also has, as his defensive coordinator, Chris Dishman, who's an all-pro cornerback way back in the day with the Houston Oilers. He's coaching the defense there. So when you have a guy like that, who's an all-time great cover guy coaching you, that's only going to help you even further. So there are a lot of players like that a lot of players in this league have experience playing in the XFL and playing in other leagues. So there's about 74 former XFL players on USFL rosters. So you're going to see a lot of those guys who are right on the fringe of making NFL teams, because the XFL, for a league that was only around for 5 weeks, they have 27 players in the NFL right now.
Wow.
So, yeah. And there are 46 former XFL players that are in the CFL, 74, as I mentioned, that are in the USFL. So these leagues can produce talent. The thing with a lot of these leagues is that what a lot of people don't realize is in the National Football League, only 1.9% of all college football players make the NFL. So what happens every year is there are a lot of college football players that don't get an opportunity to extend their pro careers. Some end up playing indoor football. That's fine. Some end up going to Canada and playing there. That's great too. But there's a lot of players who don't get an opportunity. Even in the NFL, the average NFL career is only 4 years. So when you think about that, that means there's a lot of young guys. And sure, partly that has to do with injury, but there are a lot of young guys that don't get an opportunity to see their second contract, because every year the NFL is adding new blood into the league. You got hundreds of players every year. So within a 3 to 5 year span, you got thousands of new players coming in. So people lose their jobs quickly. So that's what you see with these leagues like the USFL and the XFL and CFL. You see a lot of those players that, didn't washed out of the NFL because they couldn't make it up the ladder, couldn't break through that glass ceiling, and they don't get an opportunity to play. And without getting an opportunity to play and not getting any game reps and all that, it's hard to prove how good you are.
Wow, that's a stat I never knew about when it comes to NFL.
Yeah, and then the NCAA.
Amazing.
If you go to the NCAA website, you and if you look this up, percentage of players that make it to the NFL, it's only 1.9%. And every year, this is the thing, there are so many college football programs. So every year there are thousands of draft eligible players.
Right.
The NFL only takes 256 of them. then maybe 100, maybe undrafted free agents get an opportunity on NFL rosters. Some of them make it. There are a lot of great players throughout the history of the NFL that are undrafted that make it. But you're looking at basically maybe 350 to 400 new college players that get an opportunity to, you know, play in the NFL the next year, or at least be on a practice squad or something. But within every year, they're replacing in and out. So that's the way the NFL works. These careers go by quick. We know about all the star players, but if you look at the bottom end of rosters, if you just go back 3 or 4 years ago and look at an NFL roster, say in 2018, you go, oh my goodness, some of these guys are not here anymore. Like especially the bottom end of it, anywhere from 35 to 55, those guys aren't around anymore. And it's not because, you know, I hate to use this term, but because they sucked. Right. It's just the opportunity. The numbers game pushes you out. It just if you can't, like Shea Patterson. I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan of his. I'm hoping he does great. Obviously I saw what he did in college, but how do we know how good Shea Patterson actually is in the NFL? Because he got no reps, he got no game action. So it's not exactly. I mean, there are better players in front of him. He's not playing in front of Patrick Mahomes, obviously. But you know, without getting that opportunity, we can't say for sure whether he's you know, a good player or not. It's hard to tell. He just hasn't had that chance to get that. And that's what's great about leagues like the XFL, USFL, other leagues like it, is they give these players a chance to actually get on the field and play and prove it, whether or not they belong, whether or not they deserve to be pro players or not.
Now, as of right now, we don't know who the commentators for the Fox USFL and the NBC broadcasters, by the way. So I assume like Fox will probably use Gus Johnson, because Gus Johnson not only does college football, but he also does college basketball as well. So I assume like Fox will probably use Gus Johnson as well to do the broadcast. But the one question, exactly. But the one big question is, who will NBC use as their USFL broadcaster? Because I could see like a Drew Brees being a color commentator, or like a Mike Tirico, because Mike Tirico will be doing Sunday Night Football, or it'll probably be somebody from we never even heard of, or for NBC. Because
the NBC, I'm not, you know, I've heard of Gus. I reported on this too. Gus Johnson and Joe Klatt are expected to be at least for week 1.
Okay.
For that opening game. Now, NBC, obviously, because it's a simulcast in week 1, they're only going to have one announced team. So I would assume if you've got Gus Johnson and Joe Klatt, no need to bring in an NBC group, right? But in the future weeks, they're going to have to decide. Now, Tirico would be amazing if they can get him to do a USFL game. That would be tremendous. There could be some announcers that haven't, like in the XFL that just passed, right? Kevin Burkhart, Greg Olson did it, right? And you never know. We'll see what happens with Burkhart, but he could end up, now that you know,
the top for Fox NFL Sunday, because I've heard he's the top candidate for the Fox NFL Sunday, because
he was terrific. And and I can see that. I could see, you know, and he was terrific in the XFL. And so I talked about a couple minutes ago how this is a little bit of a breeding ground for young players to get an opportunity. Well, it's also for announcers. So like, I hate to put it this way, but a lot of announced teams have like a B team, a C team, a D team, right? So if you might see Fox and NBC take guys from their C team and B team or D team, get an opportunity to be the lead in the USFL, and then you go, wow, these guys are pretty damn good. And they might move up the ladder like Kevin Burkhart has. So, I mean, that's great. That's great opportunities. I mean, in the XFL, you had Steve Levy. Now there's changes going on with Monday Night Football. In the XFL, you had Steve Levy and Brian Greasy.
And then you had Bob Wisconsin.
Right. And so like over time, you know, these guys get an opportunity, and you never know, just like the players, they might be so good at the job that they get the top gigs in the NFL. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure yet who NBC is going to run with.
Because that's a coin flip right there.
Right. So we'll see. But Fox, I mean, if you're Fox, you know, Gus Johnson's a very busy man, one of the most talented play-by-play guys on the planet. So you would want the energy he brings. You know, he's great at calling the action. He brings excitement to the game. So it would be great to watch a USFL game and see Gus Johnson and Joe Klatt, who already have chemistry together, work together.
Oh, yeah.
And the great thing they have, too, is they have knowledge of a lot of the players that are in the USFL because they're college football guys.
Correct.
So that's a big factor with these games. You want people who cover the games to actually have knowledge of these players. And, you know, can break them down, because there's going to be a lot of players in the league that played in the SEC, that played for Alabama, Auburn, whatever. And so you want those kind of guys on the call. So that first week, they're going all out that first week. So they're trying to fill up the stadium in Birmingham there, Protective Stadium. They're trying to fill that up. They're going all out with the simulcast on Fox and NBC. You want it to look good on TV. You want it to sound good. Hopefully the action, the play on the field is good. I'm not saying the players aren't good in this league, but I'm a little worried about the early portion of the season, these teams gelling and playing well. So we'll see how crisp the quality of play is when week one comes.
Now, I was getting ready to say this because usually when you're a number two in a broadcast, you usually get demoted. You hardly ever see a number two goes to a number one. But with like a Kevin Burkhart situation, this is probably like the first time I've ever seen a broadcaster going from a number two to a number one. You hardly ever see that.
That's true. That's a good point, Sean. Yeah. And, I honestly think Burkhart, watching him, he's gotten better over time. And I was really impressed with him during XFL games, watching the XFL. I thought he did a very good job, and that made me take notice of him more. His knowledge was on display, and he's a professional there. So, yeah, you're right. It's rare, but sometimes, somebody can, you give him a chance to shine in the spotlight, and that's exactly what they do.
Exactly. And one more question before we get ready to wrap this up. Now, let's say like the USFL is very successful, right, for that 1 year. Could you possibly see that the USFL attract people that want to own a USFL franchise, like a minority type?
Sure, they are definitely, that's the goal. So here's what they're doing, right? So a lot of these leagues that didn't last in the past, the common denominator, the thing that took them down was finances. So what Fox is trying to do is putting all the teams in one location because they want to save money on all the expenses that it takes when you have these teams in individual markets.
Okay.
So by having them all in one place, you don't have to worry about travel expenses. You don't have to worry about any of that. So what they're trying to do is they look at the model of why did these leagues fail? And it was because of the finances. So what their ultimate goal is to sell off each franchise. So they want to present a good enough product on TV and they get good ratings and get good reviews to the point where they can lure. It's almost the 2022 season in Birmingham is a showcase to kind of sell off the franchises.
Right.
So what they want to do is they want to have somebody in Michigan come along and say, you know what, I'd love to get a group together and purchase the Michigan Panthers or the Philadelphia Stars.
Like a trust fund or something like that.
Right. So we could see, and I know that they have, I'm sure Eric Shanks, who runs Fox, has got an idea of some certain people they would like to reach out to. This is what's happening right now with the 2022 season. They're willing to stay in Birmingham for as long as it takes. So like, let's just say, for example, 3 of the teams find owners, but 5 of them do not. They're willing to keep 5 of them in Birmingham until they're sold off. So what Fox knows is it's going to take hundreds of millions of dollars to operate this league. So what they want to do is lure in owners to cover the finances for each individual team rather than them having to take care of all 8 teams. And so that's where the money starts being spent, is when you have to put teams in markets, you have to sell tickets in their markets, you have to spend money on promotion and marketing and all that. And so Fox is trying to avoid that. The way you avoid having to pick up the bill on that is you sell off each franchise. You can sell them off for a franchise fee, and then whoever the owners are, they'll take care of the team. They'll pay the team presidents and the GMs and the training staff and the facilities and all that. So it's an interesting model. It's an interesting bet that they're taking. We haven't seen this before to this extent, where Fox,
as far as professional wise.
Yeah, professional.
Usually in the minor you see that, but professionally you hardly ever see that.
And in the past, like NBC, the old XFL back in 2001, NBC owned half of that league. But this is a situation where Fox is controlling an entire league by themselves. So they're, the network is owning a professional football league. So they want to do this. They worked with the XFL. They saw the success that the XFL had in 2020. That's what led them to think this can be viable. So that's why we're here. That's why the USFL is happening. So if they're able to sell off the franchises, that's going to be huge for them. But the big key is the quality of the product. That week 1, they're going to have good eyeballs. I don't know what ratings they're looking for.
Right.
In the first week, it could be a couple million. Maybe that's the target for them, 3 million. the way TV works now, the way broadcast work now, sports are king because networks want live content, and it's the only thing that's DVR proof is sports. So if you can hit on a property that can deliver you 2 million viewers, 1 million viewers, 1.5 million every week, networks will be happy with that because the world has changed so much and people have so many viewing options that it's actually hard to get a couple million people to actually sit there for 3 hours and watch your product. So, it's kind of interesting to see what happens with Fox, but their product on the field is going to be important. You know, in week 1, they're going to have an opportunity to, it's going to look good. It's going to sound good. They'll have a nice crowd there in Birmingham. The local people will be happy that pro football is returning to their city. So we'll see. The quality of the football is going to be key. If they present a decent enough product that lures people in and keeps people's interest, then they might have something. So we'll see how it goes.
Mike Mitchell on this program. Now, where can my listeners find you on social media?
I'm at by Mike Mitchell, so that's BYMikeEMITCHELL. As you mentioned at the top, I write for USFLnewshub.com, XFLnewshub.com, thejetpress.com, and CFLnewshub.com. So I guess I got a lot going on there, but you can reach me at by Mike Mitchell on Twitter, and you'll see everything there.
Right. Now, looking forward to have you on after week 1, because I'm looking forward to have you back on because I really want to hear your recap after week 1, because week 1 is like very important for anybody that's trying to follow the USFL, whether you're an old fan or like just a football fan in general.
What's fascinating is the opening game on Fox and NBC is actually the New Jersey Generals and the Birmingham Stallions. And the unique part about the league this year is for 7 of the teams, they're playing at a neutral site, but one team, the Birmingham Stallions, are playing home games essentially all season. So if they get to the playoffs, then they'll be playing in Ohio. But so that's going to be an interesting scenario there. That's actually a road game, the only road game of the season for the New Jersey Generals, because they're going to be trying to spoil Birmingham's debut in their own home city. So it's going to be interesting. So, and then obviously, as I mentioned in our discussion, that week 1 opening game has a lot of importance, not just for those 2 teams, but for the entire league.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking this opportunity to watch this segment.
Sounds great.
If you like what you just saw, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube.